Book 7, The Soldier in the Middle of the World, Chapter 7. I've realized this past year that there are worse things than dying. 1 year ago. One long, miserable year ago. Mari stood in the back garden as the sun was rising, a kerchief wrapped appropriately around her nose and mouth, but it seemed unnecessary. The remaining ash had settled, and a light rain the evening before kept it down, but mercifully didn't harden it. She'd been planning for weeks to mark this day properly, beginning by herself. But how to do so, well, nothing ever came to mind. There wasn't much of a sunrise either, obscured by rain clouds from the east and steamy clouds from deceit that still drifted upward. Mari had considered sitting on the bench where they'd last been together, sharing their last kiss, but it felt wrong to be there alone. She hadn't sat there since Perrin died, even when Pato moved it to another location just to give it a different feel. She instead walked to his boulder, where his name was carved, and looked at the stones around it with the names of all the family. Another one would be added next season, when Heisey and Wes welcomed their firstborn. Mari ran her fingers along the grooves of his name, aware that her feet were over his body, and his army-issued long knife she had Deck bury there 2 feet below. After Pato had found it hidden in Perrin's desk and gave it to Mari, she held on to it for only a day and a night before realizing it should never have come to Salem, and it was time to bury the weapon. Another anniversary would be coming in a few weeks, marking 1 year since the other Perrin Shin left the estates. How Lila and Pato wanted to deal with that day, she didn't know. It wouldn't be like today's remembrance, though. Calla had come up with the plan for today 2 moons ago, when the families gathered to once again commemorate the day that the Shins and Briders escaped to Salem with Shem. Traditionally, Perrin and Shem put on their old army jackets and retold the story, usually with some embellishments to make the other look bad. But this time, no one knew what to do with Perrin's jacket, that Mari clutched to her chest. But Shem gently took the uniform from her, grinned mischievously, and whispered, "I've always wanted to try this on." He could even fasten every button. Then he stood in front of the family and announced in his best Perrin voice, "So this is what it feels like to be in charge." As the family laughed, Calla suggested that they mark the 1st year of his passing by remembering Perrin's personality. The 3 families would join after dinner for an "I remember when Perrin" evening. They'd bring out his old uniform again, and everyone would share their favorite experiences. Deck already asked Mari if he could borrow the jacket to reenact how the commander of Edge greeted him his first day after Deck's parents had passed away. Jatesy confided to her mother that she spied on Deck and Holling practicing in the barn. Deck had down the quick walk of Colonel Shin as he marched to confront a young Deckett Brighter, who he assumed was a thief. Holling, who was the same age that Deck had been at the time, was practicing his surrender and flop against the barn as Colonel Shin drew his sword and demanded to know just who he thought he was. Deck promised Mari she would laugh, and she readily agreed he could use the uniform. Besides, it was nice to see someone wearing it again, and she hoped everyone would want to turn donning it. But that would be tonight. For this morning, she wanted to mark the day alone. Secretly, she had hoped he would come to her, if only briefly to hug her again as he did when he left. Just anything to feel him again. But he hadn't come yet. Now, as she wandered aimlessly in the orchard, it seemed like a silly idea. She touched one of the leaves of a pear tree, and it crumbled like it was the end of harvest season. There were so many more things to worry about right now, and she felt selfish for feeling sorry for herself. Selfishness wasn't a Salem trait. She looked around to make sure she was alone before she said, "Perrin, can you hear me?" Silence. "Where are you? Are you still with young Pear?" Nothing. Mari sighed dejectedly and leaned against another pear tree. She pulled down her useless kerchief and closed her eyes in prayer. "Dear Creator, am I really supposed to feel so alone? Is there no hope you can deliver me? No comfort you can send me?" Silence. She opened her eyes. "Father?" she whispered to the trees. "Can't he even send you to me?" "Of course he can, my darling daughter." Mari burst into a grin. "Where have you been?" she whispered as she wiped away a tear. "You could have come to me sooner, you know." "You haven't needed me sooner. It's not as if we're sitting over here watching the latest show at the arena, you know. We're busy, Mari." "Of course you are." She sighed and smiled. "Father, do you know where he is, Perrin?" "Yes, he's fine, and he's worried about you. He had a feeling you wouldn't handle this day too well." "Well, of course not." She scoffed and kicked a rotting piece of underripe fruit. "How would I handle this day?" "You allow yourself to mourn a little, weep a little, then laugh a great deal more tonight. It will all feel slightly better tomorrow. You promise, Father? Have I ever led you astray before?" "No," Mari smiled to the sky. "Never. Where is he?" "With young Pear." "I suppose I did tell him to stay with him, didn't I? At least young Pear has him for company." "Young Pear's not listening to anyone right now. Perrin's never left his side, just as you asked, but young Pear is struggling to hear him." Mari closed her eyes. "Oh, how bad is it, Father?" "Bad enough. But he's still alive." "He's still alive," Mari repeated. "But I've realized this past year that there are things worse than dying. Is he in a position worse than death?" "Not yet, but he's been very close. And in the future, you're right. If he doesn't start remembering how to listen, he may find himself in a position worse than death, especially since dying is far from the worst thing that can happen." Mari exhaled. "So I shouldn't be selfish today. I should be grateful my husband is still caring for my wayward grandson. That's why he can't comfort me." "You're not alone, Mari. No matter how often you feel you are, we frequently interpret our feelings incorrectly. He's always thinking of you, as you are of him. He's not that far away. And he has a message for you." Mari's eyes filled with tears. "Really?" "He wanted me to tell you that you're the most perfect woman in the world, and that he still loves and adores you more than words can say." Mari laughed and sobbed at the same time. "That's my line! How dare he steal my line?" "And that's exactly how he said you would respond. I can bring him back a message if you'd like." "Oh, yes, Father, please. Tell him he took my line." Mari stomped her foot childishly and laughed. "Now I have to come up with something else." She shook her head in delight that she was still debating, in a way, with her husband. It's exactly what she would have wanted to do today. Tell him I miss him terribly, every day, every night. Tell him that I love him eternally. Tell him there's going to be a family party tonight where everyone will relate their favorite stories about him. Tell him that little Perenzinus is the fattest baby ever to exist in Salem. Poor thing might never be able to walk. Just tell him. Tears brimmed in her eyes. "Tell him I can hardly wait to be with him again, and thank him for keeping his promises." "I will, Mari, right now." And she knew he was gone, but still she smiled. "There's more to tell you, Perrin," she murmured to herself. "But seeing as how you've got a lot to deal with, I didn't want to burden you." She strolled over to the plum trees and fingered a plum that looked like it might ripen before the rest of the tree died. "I want you to know that—" The plum dropped off the tree, and she winced apologetically at it. "I want you to know that Henri— Well, let me back up. Henri's been a very good friend these past few moons. A very good friend," she confessed guiltily. "He started off by letting me cry in his arms about missing you. Then he tricked me into going to a dance with him. Don't worry, I was horrible at it, and two formerly robust men are still limping. But that was only the start. He started taking me to all kinds of rectory activities and reminded me how to laugh. It wasn't until a few weeks ago when Jatesy and Pato took me aside for the most awkward conversation in the history of Salem that I realized Henry has been courting me. You see, you never courted me. We debated in public, then you came over to apologize, then suddenly we decided to get married. I didn't even realize Henry's intentions until your children said to me, "We want you to know that we've always loved Henry and that he came to ask our permission to speak to you about the future." Yes, she chuckled ruefully. He even went about proposing to me more properly than you had, checking first with my family and getting their permission. And your children granted it, you should know. They told me they didn't want me to be lonely, and that I seemed so happy with him. It only made sense, they said. She leaned against an apple tree and looked up through the leafless branches. Instead of waiting for him to come over and make his grand proposal, I went to his house. And there I told him, no. She clenched her jaw and blinked back frustrated tears. And do you know why, Parent Shin? Because you've ruined me for any other man. Oh, and Henry is a man, I'll tell you. She smiled miserably. He's adventurous, charming, even more thoughtful than you, and with dimples. When he smiles, who knew I'd fall for dimples? Her chin quivered. But I couldn't. Oh, I just couldn't. I mean, how ridiculous is that, at our age, figuring out whose house to live in, and how to rearrange the furniture, and how to make up a new routine we could both live with. Just so much work. But she sighed, because that wasn't the entire truth. No, the real problem is, I sleep with your uniform on occasion. I lay it in our bed, and I dream that I can still smell you in the fibers, earthy sweet. And what if I woke up next to Henry, dreaming about you? She shuddered in embarrassment. Yes, he'd be her husband, but Shem and Kala didn't understand it. They came over the next day to tell me how adorable they thought we were, how there was nothing wrong with our being together until we could be with Nan and you again. Just because we both committed to our spouses for forever doesn't mean we can't be with someone else until we can be reunited. Then they started listing all the widows and widowers we know who have remarried. And then, if that wasn't bad enough, 2 of Henry's daughters came over to tell me that their mother would be thrilled if I were to marry their father. Oh, Perrin, she sighed wretchedly, I've never been so torn in my entire life. When I said no to Henry, I felt like I disappointed everyone we know. But if I said yes to him, then I feel like I was betraying you. She strolled over to the cattle fence and leaned against it. But there's something no one else seems to realize, Perrin. I even brought it up with Henry, who still visits every day on the pretext of checking on me. But I think he's just waiting for me to break and change my mind. She chuckled sadly. But Perrin, the last day? It's got to be just around the corner. Why should Henry and I marry when, in maybe a few short weeks, we'll be back with our first loves? I tried to explain that to him, but before I could get too far, he reminded me that we have stored 4 years' worth of food. In Henry's mind, the last day won't be here for at least that long. And Shem, oh, he's even worse. He claims he's not even sure if this is the awakening of deceit, although I know I heard him asking the Creator about that the morning it happened. And the look on his face then, oh, he knew it was. Yet he claims it could still be decades away, even though there's no deceit left. Perrin, I'm surrounded by faithful and humble fools. Why won't they see the truth? Oh, and people around here think I'm a little unstable, in case you haven't heard. Dr. Thorne came by last night asking my opinions about John Offra, who I think is doing quite well given the circumstances. I thought you'd like to know. But I had the feeling Thorne was evaluating my mental stability too. But Perrin, I can't help but be happy. The world's falling apart. A branch of a peach tree in front of her broke off and crumbled as it hit the ground. See? Just like that, quite literally. But why can't anyone see that's a great thing? I keep imagining how you'll look again, restored and whole and maybe even younger. She unconsciously hugged herself. Heaving yourself cheerfully out of that grave, dusting yourself off and grinning at me in that way. She looked around. This is the oddest conversation I've ever had with trees. You can see why I can't explain this to anyone, right? Poor Henri can't even consider that sweet Nan will be running into his arms before we could figure out where to place the sofas. No one gets it, Perrin. No one but me. So if you hear any rumors that I'm going a bit grainy, don't believe them. I'm the only rational thinking person around here. I'm still grieving you, don't you worry. But I won't be for long. She grinned to the sky, then fairly skipped on her way back to the house, so full of hope that she was ready to explode like that ridiculous mountain in the south. By that morning, Corporal Shin had it figured out. He dressed early and stood outside Thorne's quarters waiting. He purposely ignored the officer's breakfast, bypassing the bowl of sausages that would only remind him of how naively he trusted Colonel Glasser. Shin wished he could find a copy of the writings that Glasser had shown him. Now he was sure Guide Hiram's last prophecy was wrong. While the words of the guides always warmed him a little, what he read the other morning did nothing but give him stupid notions of glory. The chosen one. He'd been chosen to be every gambler's token. Shin paced the hall, plotting how to phrase his plan to Thorne. He'd found a third hand, and he was sure he could stay on top of everything. He just needed some time to think. He could be Thorne's son, no, heir, and could become an officer, and could... That's where he got hung up. What did he want now that he was knitting his soul to the leader of the world? While that question filled him with anxiety, there was something admirable about Thorne, even special. Maybe that was why Salem and Shem Zenas was afraid of him. But Thorne was also unpredictable, and as much as the image of a dead Captain Nelt haunted him, the memory of Thorne thrusting through his captain worried him more. True, Lick was ingratiating and irritating, but that wasn't enough to kill him for, was it? Maybe it had something to do with Salem. Just how much did Lick and Thorne know about it, and why? And what would Thorne do if he found out Shin was from there? Surely Thorne wouldn't kill his own son out of disappointment, would he? But didn't he say last night that Shin had disappointed him repeatedly? And what if he realized Shin wasn't his and Jatesy's son? He had to know. The timing was all wrong. He remembered Pugga's warning. Thorne believed any lies that got him what he wanted. Amory had said something similar when they were sneaking away. The truth is what you believe it is. And really, he thought in the middle of the night, the story didn't have to be true, as long as it produced the desired result. Even Shem Zenas lied to his best friends for 17 years to achieve a higher good. He couldn't be completely honest and still smuggle people out of the world. The truth would have ruined everything. He pondered that concept for an hour in his sleepless night and decided, why ruin everything with the truth? He could be Thorne's heir, be an officer, and maybe even the next great general of the world. And only then would he reveal Salem. He could return in power and glory and really unite the world. And it didn't need to be a devastating invasion like the guide's predictions, but a seamless melding of two societies into one great whole. He, Perrin Shin Thorne, could become the greatest general the world ever saw. Now, how could a man sleep with thoughts like that on his mind? But he also realized there was a great deal he didn't know and not a lot of time to learn it. He needed to start thinking like a great leader, and he knew from where the greatest leaders came. As he grew wearier, his mind began to drift and wonder what became of the tribute song Nelt was writing for him with 300 verses, one for each horse Shin had procured from the stable at Pools. It probably went no further than Nelt's mind. Shin felt a stab of guilty sorrow. Nelt would have been a good man to keep nearby. Then stray verses of Nelt's other songs drifted through his mind, and all he could remember were the most explicit phrases. Then thoughts of Sargon's lonely mourning daughters popped up, creating such an arousing agitation it was remarkable he ever got to sleep. When he awoke that morning, he knew that if he went to the mansion, he'd forget his resolve to not be involved with women. Thorne's door opened. "Corporal Thorne, and we're going to change that on your jacket as soon as possible." The general pointed to the Shin label on his uniform. "Today, if we can. What are you doing here?" Shin stood at attention. "Wishing to speak to you, sir. Do you have a moment?" Thorne sneered. "Thought you'd change your mind about a few things we discussed last night. Come in." He tipped his head. The corporal sat down formally on a wooden chair as Thorne dropped casually on his bed. "So, what do you want to talk about, son?" "Sir," Shin began, hoping the right words would come, and that maybe an old general would give him the correct phrasing. No whispers came. "I'm concerned about your hold on the northern forts. Now that we realize Major Jordan was plotting against you, it seems that a strong presence should return to the north as quickly as possible." Thorne nodded slowly. "I'm arranging for a colonel from Orchards to take over at Sands. Up to Edge, I plan to send a solid major I knew the last time I held Idemia. He's been enjoying the heat of flax for far too long. More assignments are forthcoming." "Excellent, but, sir, I fear your presence will be missed." Thorne leaned back. "Continue." "But you're needed here in Idemia to fortify your claim to the city. You certainly can't be in two places at once." "No, I can't." "But, sir, I could, not be in two places, but act as you, in behalf of you. I now have your name, so perhaps some of your influence will accompany that. Sir, I think I should go back to Edge as a reminder to all those in the north that your presence is still there." It hadn't come out as eloquently as he'd rehearsed it. About 4 versions ago, it was much clearer, but the steady gaze of General Thorne had a tendency to muddle his thinking. He thought of one more thing that he could say to clinch the deal, but found himself gagging on the word. Perhaps another day. Thorne leaned forward on the bed. "You're choosing to not sleep in the gold room. Boy, have you any idea what that room is like?" Shin risked a smile. "I imagine it's shiny with a hint of gold in it." Thorne slowly smiled as well. "Hint of gold. Funny. Just like your mother," he whispered. "She could always make me laugh." The corporal shifted uncomfortably. Thorne sighed. "As much as I hate to admit it, you make a valid point, Lek. To be honest, I've been concerned about the supply situation in Edge since the eruption. Major Kroop's on his own without you to influence his decisions. Yes, I know it was you. Edge may be one of our last remaining strongholds of food, and Kroop's likely feeding it to the hogs when Healy isn't looking, instead of butchering the animals for food." He gestured to the air. "Ah, but Lek, Idemia! I can't bear the thought of not showing it to you." "It still sounds a little dusty, sir." Shin tried to smile again. Thorne returned it. "But what about this? I return to Edge, evaluate the situation there, make a detailed plan for distribution that not even Kroop could mess up, then work my way back down? I could stop at Winds and Coast as well. I know what the supply number should be for every fort. I figured it out while I was helping Kroop. In a few weeks, I'd be back here, and the citizens will have cleaned up Idemia for me to see in its full glory." Thorne studied Shin for a moment before giving him a short nod. "Clever, and with a great deal of insight, just as I expected. I'll send you with a security force of no fewer than 25 soldiers. I expect you to return to me at the High General's mansion no later than 4 weeks from today, and I'll see to it that you're properly entertained when you arrive," he added with a quiet snigger. Shin ignored the last comment. "Thank you, sir. I mean, for letting me go to Edge. I'll impress you, I promise." "I'm already impressed. You're showing forethought in considering the future. Many graduates of command school can't think beyond midday meal. And speaking of command school," Thorne said, consulting a stack of papers on the desk near the bed. Better make your return for a little sooner. Command school resumes on the 90th day of weeding. Since today is the 63rd day, that means you have only—" Shin nearly toppled over. "Excuse me, sir, what did you say today's date is?" Thorne looked up. "The 63rd day. Something wrong, son? You look as if you've seen another spirit." "No, sir," he mumbled. I guess I lost track of time. It's just my mother's birthday today," he salvaged. "She would have been 46. But it wasn't a birthday that made him go pale. 1 year ago, just 1 year ago, he walked past his body and touched his hand one last time. What were his last words to them that afternoon? Shin couldn't remember. 1 year ago. Thorne was shaking his head sympathetically. "Maybe today was Lilla Brighter's birthday," he said quietly, when he saw the emotion in the corporal's eyes. "But your real mother would have been 44 back in planting season. I always remember beautiful Jatesy on her birthdays. Now we can remember her together when her 45th comes next year, and imagine what she would have looked like. I have a few stories I can share with you. She was a fascinating woman. We were very close. Closer than you might imagine," he emphasized. Shin knew what response was wanted, but he'd heard only bits and pieces in his surprise that it had been 1 year ago. "Yes, sir," he said vaguely, and tried to shove away the date. He'd deal with it later. He cleared his throat and asked, "Then I have your permission to return to Edge today in your name?" "Yes, of course, son. Take onus with you. I'll start drafting a letter to establish your identity and authority." Thorne got up and walked over to Shin. He fingered the name label on his uniform, and Shin froze at the general's touch. "I suppose they'll have to wait," he said disappointedly. Then again, maybe not. Instead of going to Wynn's on the way back, stop there on the way to Edge. The officer's tailor shop is there. They'll get you relabeled in the time it takes you to evaluate their supply barns. Shin stood up, trying to suggest it was time for him to leave. "Yes, sir. Just provide me with directions. I've never been to Wynn's." Thorne smiled as genuinely as he could. "While you're gone, you're going to work on that 'sir,' right? It's not really a hard word to say, Lek. Father?" Shin tried to return the smile, but he couldn't seem to make his muscles conform adequately. What he produced seemed to be enough, though. The general smiled wider and gripped Shin's shoulder. "Promise me you'll be careful, all right? No unnecessary risks. Let lower men of no consequence do the dangerous stuff. I want you healthy to begin command school." Before Shin could answer, Thorne caught him in a one-armed embrace, which shocked Shin more than anything in the past few days. The general seemed to actually mean it. Thorne stepped back and nodded formally. "Get your things ready, Corporal, and advise Onus he's heading north. You can leave in 2 hours' time." "Thank you, sir," Shin saluted before heading out the door. By mid-morning, Shin, Sergeant Onus, and 25 soldiers as guard were mounted, with 3 days' worth of rations and heading north. General Thorne saw them off. Shin gave the general his best smile and good wishes before turning north. Once he faced where the mountains would eventually appear, right now a haze of grayish blue in the distance, he felt much lighter. He and Onus rode through the middle of the guard, each soldier told by General Thorne that the safe return of his son in a few weeks would guarantee him a reward such as only Idemia could provide. With that tantalizing thought, each man pledged to guard Corporal Thorne with his life. Sergeant Onus was given the privilege of keeping him company, and heard him sigh in relief. "So, Shin," he said quietly, as they rode side by side, "we haven't spoken much since I arrived, but according to that sigh, I'd say you've had enough excitement. Happy to go home where it's quiet?" Shin glanced over at him. "Is it that obvious?" Onus chuckled. "Only to someone who's known you since your initial training. So, what's been harder to get used to? Walking for days on end, then digging out of a mudslide? Or becoming the son of the most powerful man in the world?" "Sir, I hardly know how to answer that question." Onus nodded in understanding. "Do you know what I'm looking forward to?" he said with a smirk. "Watching Major Croupp's expression when he learns who you are. Promise me I get to be there?" Shin snorted. It was the closest thing to a laugh he'd made in nearly a year. "Maybe we should have a large mug of mead ready for him, and a soft pillow for his landing." Onus laughed out loud. "Healy ought to be interesting to watch as well. He told me he knew Shin from when he was a boy and Shin was only a captain. Healy also served under him for a few weeks as a soldier before he got transferred away from the mountains." "Mountains. It'll be nice to see the mountains again," Shin said. "I didn't realize how little I enjoyed flat land until I came here." "Well, you best get used to it. Once you begin command school, you won't be leaving Idemia except during weeding season." "I hadn't considered that," he mumbled. They rode in silence, and Shin tried to conjure up the voice in his head. Why he couldn't hear him was troubling. Maybe all he had was 1 year, and then he disappeared or was reassigned or something. It wasn't that Shin needed him. He was just curious as to where he was. With no voices in his head, he thought instead about General Thorne and their last meeting in the command office before he left. The general had shut the door, sat on the desk to be near Shin, and gave him his first lesson in worldly leadership. "Enjoy the benefits of power, son. When everyone realizes you're mine, they'll treat you differently. Savor it. Otherwise, what's the point? But don't misuse your power. While you're the master, remember to throw the dogs a few bones. Pat them on the head occasionally, and they'll remain loyal. But remember, loyalty is not the same as love. Your grandfather learned that the hard way. Never reveal too much of what you know, and never trust anyone more than you trust your own worst enemy. And understand this, everyone is potentially your worst enemy." Shin had nodded obediently, ignorantly. Thorne held up the letter Shin was to carry with him at all times. "This gives you the power to act in my name to a degree. I don't give this to you lightly. Only a man with the blood of all the great former high generals in his veins can carry it properly. You alone carry that blood, Shin's, Cush, and Thorne's. You spoke once of respect and fear. People will respect what they fear. As long as you create fear but not hatred, they will respect you. That's one of the principles of leadership, and that's what I want you to practice during the next few weeks. Invoking enough fear to demand respect. The name alone will open many doors. Then it will be up to you to do the rest." There were a few more things Thorne said, but Shin's mind was fixated on power and fear and how to use the first to get the second. That morning as he rode the large black stallion, whom he'd secretly dubbed Clarker, a stray thought drifted into his mind. He tried to push away the image, but it kept floating back annoyingly in front of every other idea. It was Shemzina's last year, changing the soiled cloths of his grandnephew on the trail to the ancient temple site. King of Salem. Shin shook his head. Ridiculous. What king would change a baby's cloths? No man is more respected than him or loved. There's only one man who fears him, and soon he'll be issuing orders from the garrison in Idemia. Shin rolled his eyes, because Thorne feared no man and no thing. But he was secretly relieved the voice was back, and he shifted his thoughts to it. I wondered where you were. Is it appropriate to wish you a happy anniversary on your death? He heard a cosmic scoff. Ha! Practicing leadership? I don't remember Thorne specifying a tone of disdain, but that must be in an upcoming lesson. Leadership is different in the world. Yes, it is. It shouldn't be, but it is. Come on, young pair. You don't really believe all of this, do you? Shin bristled because already the criticism was beginning. Look, old man, look where I am. In my pocket is a letter from the General of the World granting me his name and power. Because my name and power aren't enough? You're unbelievable, young pair. Last night you whimpered in terror while using that beautiful animal as a shield, begging for help, sure that you were going to be executed by the newest leader of the world. And today you think you're on top of everything again, don't you? And Clarker, by the way, is a stupid name. Shin sighed before thinking a response. Well, I am, aren't I? I mean, on top of things again? Have you ever asked yourself why? Why 4 arrows that should have hit you last night took odd turns instead and fell harmlessly to the ash? He didn't have an answer. I'll tell you why. It's not because you're anything special. It's because a woman in Salem spends every morning and night on her knees, begging that her son will be preserved. Because a man in Salem wearies the Creator with pleas that his son will be given enough time to come to his senses. Because a grandmother asked her husband to never leave her grandson's side until he comes home. It's nothing you've done special, boy. It's because your family prays for you all the time. You've lasted this long because of them, not because of you. Shin was quiet for a moment before he responded. So why has Thorne been preserved, old man? Another cosmic sigh. Because there has to be an opposite to everything. For every push, there is a pull. For every good, there is an evil. Thorne's not evil, Shin thought. Every man believes he's the hero of his own story. Thorne believes he's noble in all that he does, that he alone can rule the world, blah, 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 blah. Well, he is noble in many ways. Oh, really? Shall we see about that? Shin didn't respond, but stared ahead as they continued to ride. Just do something before you go to Wynn's. Stop at the stables at Poole's. Roke deserves to know why he won't find his herds again. Shin cleared his throat. Sergeant, would you mind if we made a quick stop to the northeast of here? I want to go to the stables from where I took the horses and apologize about our not returning them. Maybe I could return the stallion when I come back in a few weeks, and they'll have him to reestablish their herds with. Onus nodded. Of course, Shin. I mean, Thorne. That'll take some getting used to, he muttered. You know, you don't have to do that. I'm sure they know their horses aren't coming back. I'll just feel better about everything if I... Anyway, the corporal switched mid-sentence. You don't have to do that either. Call me Thorne. I'm still wearing the Shin badge. Onus grinned in agreement. But everyone will accept it more if I start calling you Thorne, Corporal. What's your first name? Lek. Wasn't that your original first name? No, I mean, yes, Lek, yes. Onus chuckled sadly. You'll figure out who you are someday, Corporal. Don't worry, it'll all come back to you. The fields around the stables at Poole's were just as quiet and empty as they were when Shin first arrived a week ago in search of transportation. The house, too, looked quiet. But then again, so did the other handful of houses they passed. No one was out if they didn't have to be. The men stopped their horses and Shin slid off his mount. I'll go alone. They know me. This shouldn't take long. He walked up the front steps and knocked loudly on the door. Sir, he called, it's Captain Nelt. The one who took the horses from you? Sir, I've come to talk to you about returning the black stallion. He pounded on the door again, which, worryingly, wasn't fully latched. It creaked open. Roke, it's just me, the captain. Actually, I'm a corporal. He pushed into the quiet house, and a horrific stench greeted him, wrinkling his nose. Oh, no, he whispered when he realized the gathering room had been ransacked. Sir, ma'am, he called loudly, are you here? He picked his way through the room, listening for signs of movement, and wandered to the kitchen, where he stopped. The stable owner and his wife were there, sprawled on the floor, dead. No! Shin cried out and rushed over to them. Roke's bloodied body was cold, so whatever happened wasn't recent. Shin looked wildly around the kitchen. The cupboards were open and depleted of food. That must have been what they were after, whoever it was. Suddenly he remembered their teenage daughter. Hello, he shouted. Do you need help? Where are you? He hurried out of the kitchen into the stairs that led to the bedrooms on the second floor. He raced up them 3 at a time and stopped at the first bedroom. It was torn up, but no one was there. Shin rushed to the next room and threw open the door. It was the daughter's room, and she was there, and her death was terrible. The shock of it was more than he was prepared for, and he vomited on the rug. Bracing himself against the doorframe, he tried to control his panicked breathing, but felt himself growing lightheaded as he slumped to the floor. No, 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 no. Who could have done this? He whimpered. She was Canthy and Huldah and Susie's ages. Saying those names, ones that he hadn't uttered in almost a year, was jolting. He looked at the debris strewn about the room and spied a soldier's jacket. He must have taken it off before Shin's stomach spasmed again, throwing up the last in his belly. Did I cause this? He pleaded to the ceiling, wiping his chin. Did I leave the soldiers here? Was this because of the men Thorne sent to them to tell them that we're not returning their horses? Yes, young pair. His soldiers did all of this. Shin collapsed on the floor, sobbing. Now he knew why his grandfather told him to go there, and it felt like a cruel trick. Pugga, no, I didn't mean for this to happen. Roke and his family didn't do anything wrong. Please, please don't let this be my fault. It's not your fault, young pair. You didn't tell the soldiers to brutalize the family. Then who did? You really can't think of anyone? Thorne? But he said they don't encourage this sort of thing. He told me that last night. He said, they don't encourage the widespread taking of girls. But this isn't widespread, young pair. This is a reward for a job well done. Thorne orders them to burn the houses when they're finished, to hide the evidence. But this group expected to return. There's still more to steal. Pugga, why the girl? She was so young. That's precisely why. She's just like Sargon's daughters, the ones you spent half the night thinking about. Pugga, no, it's not the same. I know. He gripped his head in agony. I know what I was thinking, but it wasn't this. Are you sure? The smell from the room was overwhelming. Gasping for breath, he scrambled away from the stairwell and leaned against the banister. Not much difference between what you fantasized and what you see here. A sweet girl suffers excruciatingly. Death is preferable to what she experienced at the hands of the soldiers. She was thankful when it came. Enough! Shin shouted. Enough! He held his face in his hands and whimpered. Thorne couldn't know what they did. He couldn't imagine this. He wouldn't approve. Why not, young pair? Why can't you believe he doesn't know? That he hasn't done it himself? That he didn't try to do it to your aunt, whom he claims he still loves? Can you not believe it because he calls you son? Because you can't imagine a man willing to take you as his could really be such a selfish animal? I don't really want to be his son, Pugga, he said. I don't want to call him father. I just want to stay alive. I just want... Command school? And what kind of a man will command school make of you? I can tell you. Another General Thorne. Apples don't fall too far from their trees, young pair, unless they're on a hill. Look around. Idemia is very flat. I won't be like him, Pugga, Shin promised. I'll be different. I'll be better. How? Who will show you how to be better? Name one officer in the world alive who can teach you to be better. Shin had no ready answer. That's what I thought. One of the last good men in the world was killed here. He lies in his kitchen with his excellent wife, and in his pocket is something he'd hoped you'd come back for. Shin looked up bleakly. What is it? Go down to his body. Right now he's telling me he kept it in his front shirt pocket, waiting for your return. Shin stood up and trembled his way down the stairs. He turned to the kitchen and approached the still body of the stable owner, where he could see the folded parchment in the man's front shirt pocket. His eyes filled with tears as he carefully pulled it out and opened it. Roke, I'm sorry this note is coming to you so late. I haven't been well, but I wanted you to know. Shin's vision grew too blurry to read further, and he fought back a sob. It was the letter Colonel Shin had sent a 19-year-old Roke many years ago. Roke had been the first of hundreds in the world who had sent Colonel Shin a note of condolence after his parents had been killed. The Shin family had responded to every letter, Perrin Shin writing this response himself. His grandson could see clearly only the last lines. Always remember who you are, and you'll always succeed. Perrin Shin. I know who I am, Pugga, he whispered to the parchment. Then why are you here, young pair? Pugga, if I run away now, they'll follow me to Salem. It's too dangerous. But I can handle this. I know so much more than I did, and all of the pheasants are being flushed, so I'll be safer. Pheasants have a way of reproducing. You'll never be completely safe, and you still don't know half of what's going on. Shin folded the old note and shoved it in his back pocket. I can do this, Pugga. I just need more time, a little more training. Young pair, sometimes you're just so thick. Is this why you came back to me? His patience growing thin. Just to criticize me? This is why I left the estates. No, look, I'm sorry. I was trying to say that I know the real reason you don't want to go home. You're not afraid Idemia will find Salem. You're afraid Salem will find out about you. Clenching his fists, he seethed. You know nothing, old man. He spun and marched to the front door. Young pair, they still want you back, no matter what. He paused to wipe the wetness from his face before trotting down the stairs and back to his horse. Sergeant Onus was getting off his mount. Corporal, I was getting worried about you. Noticing that the corporal was flustered and twitching, he asked, Is everything all right? Yes, Shin said shortly as he took the reins of his horse. You and the others torch the house. We won't be returning. Onus's eyebrows shot up. Are you serious, Shin? He whispered. Burn it? What did you just do? Do you have any objections to Thorne's orders? Shin cut him off. Onus paled, knowing why General Thorne burned houses. No, Corporal Thorne, he said steadily. None at all. That's the end of that chapter. Thank you.